Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Beck's here today to do my 2020 book unhaul. Every Christmas I have the chance to go back to my childhood bedroom, and each year I usually comb through the books that are still here and see what I'm willing to get rid of, what I want to bring back to my place. So these books that I want to show you today are the ones that I'm ready to part with, whether I have read them or have not read them. They're going to leave my collection. I need to make space for new books that I'm more excited about. This isn't a giant unhaul by any means, but it's definitely freeing up a bit of space. And of course, anytime you get rid of books that you're just not really sure if you want to read anymore, or that you really didn't enjoy reading, it always makes you feel a little bit lighter. The first book that I want to talk about is actually one that I'm not sure if I should get rid of. I tried to read it in October 2019 and I got about 50 pages in and I'm not sure how I feel. It is We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. This is one of those books that I've had for years, and I finally decided that 2019 was going to be the year that I would try to read it, and I got to page 56, and the way it's written is, I kind of like it, but I kind of don't, and the font is very tiny, but I also kind of know the story, like I'm aware of what's going on. You find out pretty soon into the book, like, the bad stuff that Kevin's done, but I'm just not sure if it's worth continuing with. I left my bookmark in, and I'm gonna try to read a couple more chapters and just see. But if anyone has any opinions or any thoughts on whether or not I should actually bother with it, let me know. The book is over 400 pages. It's just really small font, and the pages are super thin, and the format is not motivating. So please let me know what you think. Now on to books that I am definitely getting rid of. The first one is a book that I DNF'd last year. It was one of my 9 books for 2019, and I had high hopes for it. That book was Big Weather: Chasing Tornadoes in the Heart of America by Mark Svenfold. You would think that a book about tornado chasing would be interesting, and this book is not particularly long, but it was horribly boring most of the time. He spends way too much time talking about all of the different people that are involved and not so much about the exciting stuff, so I couldn't keep track of who anybody was, and I frankly didn't care. So I think I got about 100 pages in, like I was almost halfway through this book, and I just had to let it go because it was very disappointing. So that one is definitely going away. This one is one that I picked up when I was still in high school, and it's just been sitting in my childhood bedroom waiting for the day when I either bring it back to Canada with me or actually get rid of it, and that is The Quincunx by Charles Pallister. This was a book that one of my high school classmates was reading, and this was back, before Goodreads, before there was any real external pressure from people to read books, and I saw her reading this and I was like, I love big books. I want to give this a try. This thing is huge. The font is so small, and she really seemed to like it, but I finally decided I needed to make a decision about this book. So I read the first 2 pages or whatever, and I was just, no. My reading tastes have changed in the last 10 years, so I'm just not in the mood for this book anymore. It's gonna get donated. This is one that was actually sent to me for review unsolicited, and it is A Map of Days, which is the 4th novel in the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children series by Ransom Riggs. I never read any of the other ones. I'm very aware of them, but I just never had a real inkling to read them. They just didn't quite seem like something I would be super into. And Les got this as well in a separate, PR thing for her. And she actually ended up reading the entire series because they're not super long. Like, there's a lot of pictures. I think it's middle grade. Like, that's the impression that I got. But this book is brand new, never been read, and it's not going to get read by me. Hopefully it will find a much more appropriate home somewhere else. The last books that I'm getting rid of that I haven't read is actually part of a book set. It's part of the Bronte collection, which is something that I picked up about 8 years ago at an Indigo bookstore. That was before I had of any disposable income, really. So I was always looking for good book deals, and this entire set was $20, and it has 5 books. It has Agnes Grey and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. It has Jane Eyre and the Professor by Charlotte Bronte, and then Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I had already read Jane Eyre at this point in high school, so I knew I liked Charlotte Bronte's writing, so I wanted to try her sisters, and I did read Wuthering Heights from this, but at this point, I don't feel the strong desire to read any of the other ones, and I would much prefer to have them in different editions. You can even see this blue line because the way it was printed was pretty poor. Like, there's a reason this set was $20, and it's because they're printed very cheaply. Like, that blue should be on the back of the book, not the spine. So I'm gonna pass these along, and someone can get them at Goodwill for, you know, $5. These 8 books that I have to talk about now are all books that I've read and just know that I'm not gonna read them again. Not that I necessarily hated them, but they just don't appeal to me anymore. So the first one of those is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. For those of you who caught some of our videos in 2019, you will be aware that Les and I did film a review of this book. We buddy read it together, and neither of us was particularly impressed. And I have really no desire to continue with the series. This is just not something that appeals to me, and maybe it would have 10 years ago, but it definitely doesn't now, so that's gonna get passed along. I have this little tiny book that I read many years ago called Unholy Popes, Outrageous But True Stories of Papal Misbehavior by Bob Curran. This was just something that I picked up at like the discount section at Barnes & Noble, something like that, and it's a book that I don't really feel the need to ever read again. This one I feel a little weird about. It is The Book of Unknown Americans by Cristina Enriquez. I read this book a few years ago when it was pretty popular on BookTube because I was definitely trying to diversify my reading in terms of the different stories that I was reading about, who the authors were, and this was one of the books that really fit that criteria well. And it's definitely literary fiction, but I remember almost nothing from the book, and when I look at it, I just kind of go, meh, like there's no feelings that really come back there. It definitely didn't stick with me. This is a book that I think Les actually might want to take. I'm going to offer her some of these books and see if she wants them, but because she's much more of a literary fiction kind of fan, but this one for me, there's no emotion there. There's no reason to keep it. Speaking of Les, she will definitely be upset about this one. I'm going to get rid of A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. This is the edition that we had to read in school for AP literature, so we read it together, and Les loves this book and I really don't care for it. This actually does have some spots where I've marked it up because we had to write an essay on it, of course. Maybe I can give this to Les and she could keep it because, you know, keepsake wise. And I think her edition is like a huge hardback one. So if she ever wants to reread it, she could reread it with my notes and see if she agrees with me or not. But I'm never going to read this again. It's not happening. I am also going to get rid of Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. This is a very popular book, and I did do a review on this many years ago, like maybe the second year that our channel existed. People have a lot of strong feelings about this book, and I definitely still get comments on that review today, but I just don't think I would ever really reread it. And even if I did, I prefer to have a better edition. This one has clearly been waterlogged, and it was not my doing. This was definitely a book that I picked up secondhand. So if I ever do feel the need to read this book again and I do want to own a copy, I would prefer to get something that's a little bit nicer. Next on the list is The Lost Symbol by Dan Brown. This was a book that I read in 2019. It was one of my 500+ page books that had been sitting on my shelves for forever, and so I finally said, I'm going to read it, and I read it, and I don't care. It really wasn't that good. I have read Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code. Obviously this is the third book in the Robert Langdon series, and those ones were way stronger than this one was. This was a little bit hard to get through at times. It just, it felt really rough, but there was elements of it that intrigued me. I do have the fourth book in this series, and I will probably give it a try and see if it's better, because general feelings have been that this one is the worst one, but I really have no reason to keep it on my shelf because I don't own Angels and Demons or the Da Vinci Code, so I'd rather just get rid of it and not have to think about it. Second to last, I have J-Pod by Douglas Copeland. He is a very interesting writer. His books are often very strange, and that's something that sometimes works for me, but oftentimes does not. I read this book during my first year of university, which was in late 2010 into 2011. So it's been about 10 years since I read this, and I just remember this one being really weird. I like Girlfriend in a Coma by him, and I do still have that book on my shelves, but this one just, I don't really remember it that much other than feeling like it was very weird. Like there's always funky stuff going on the pages, which is kind of fun for me to read. I enjoy reading books like that, but at the same time, I don't really care about this story, and I certainly don't need to keep it on my shelves. Finally, the last book that I will definitely be getting rid of is High School Confidential: Secrets of an Undercover Student by Jeremy Iverson. This is another book that I picked up secondhand, and I probably read it either right when I was about to graduate high school or right after I graduated. I have a memory of reading this book in a bagel shop by myself. So I at least had to be 16 when I read this book, because that's when I got my license and was able to drive around on my own and, you know, do my own things. So I was at least at the end of high school, if not just recently graduated, and this is a nonfiction book about a guy who is in his mid-20s and he goes undercover at a high school in California, I believe, and he lives and like pretends to be one of the students just to like see what it's like to be a student these days. And I think at the time I was curious about it because I was a recently graduated or current high school student, and so I wanted to kind of see what an outsider's perspective would be. And now that I think about the premise of this book, it's kind of creepy to me that some dude kind of like, you know, got into this school and pretended to be 16 or 17 and he was actually 24. Like, I don't remember there being any sort of like explicit relationship things or anything like that that was definitely illegal, but it's still creepy to have somebody like that like knowingly do it and report on it. So I just kind of feel uncomfortable about this book now. So I'm gonna get rid of it, because I'm definitely not going to read it again. Ugh, no. No thank you. Those are all of the books that I am going to be clearing off my shelves now that we are into 2020. If you have any thoughts or feelings on any of the books that I mentioned, if you have an opinion about We Need to Talk About Kevin, please let me know in the comments below. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.